In this episode, we're going to talk megachurch drama clubs, take a hard look at whether or not we're actually making disciples, how to be an intentional friend, and the great goal kerfuffle of the week. I'm excited for that
Hi, Danielle.
one. Hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you? Your week okay?
Yeah. It's fine. I am tired, and everyone's sick. I feel like everybody
around here is
I think we're
sick.
like,
I'm not sick.
I'm not sick. I'm pounding.
And my whole family
vitamin
got
C.
sick too. I didn't get sick.
I don't know what it is. If it's just the cold, I don't know.
Yeah.
Everyone just dropping like flies.
Yep.
But I'm doing good.
Good.
Yeah. So, hey.
Hi.
So let's start with some megachurch memories. This is where we focus on what was, what should or shouldn't have been, and what maybe endured.
In the 90s.
In the 90s,
right?
80s, 90s. Yeah, megachurch. And we've said even last week, not to disparage it, maybe to make fun of it a little bit, but there are some things that we learned. So
for sure.
You picked this week's.
Yeah. So I just thought it was such a funny. So I feel like every megachurch had this like almost fixation with drama, with doing skits, sketches, whatever.
Yes.
There were different names for it.
Yep.
But these live action little mini plays.
Yeah.
That we would do in our services. And we did lots of it. We did youth ministry together back in the day.
We did a lot, not only youth ministry, but like
in
main.
the church. Yeah, main stage.
Remember the bed?
Oh my God.
Remember the marriage one?
Yeah, we had a couple in bed together.
Couple
on
in
stage.
bed arguing.
Oh, man.
Anyway, sorry, that just hit my. I didn't have that in my notes. I just trauma.
I remember the week we had a family. We were talking about conflict and within a family, and we had to set up a whole boxing ring.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Had like dads and moms tapping out and coming in to fight the kids.
It was one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a high production value skit too. We had good lighting, smoke. That was awesome.
And I think about like. That was a precursor to really being able to use video widely because whatever video production wasn't a big thing in the church yet. So I think that it almost paved the way for us to do stuff on the screens. But there was a season where live drama was it.
Who was king?
Do you remember any of your favorite standard issue? Because you could go to any. Like, it was like anything. It was like worship songs where like churches would share these same dramas that they would do on their stages.
The one that sticks with me the most is like no matter what youth conference you went to, one of the youth groups was putting on the Carmen,
the champion,
champion play, It was just. His song on a boombox, and they're just doing all the stuff. But it was the same, no matter where you went. And they might have like fire if you're like at a real church or whatever. But like, I remember that one.
I think about the one where I'm not sure if it was the same one or not, but like where all the people around the stage in black shirts and black T-shirts. Remember?
This could be 8 different ones, but yeah, I think I know where you're going.
Everybody had a little sign on their chest that said like. Rock music or drugs or whatever, and peer pressure. And then they were sometimes in chains or ropes.
Ropes.
And then the Jesus character would come around and they'd stand them up and hug them and give them a white shirt. Remember that?
Yes.
So
I remember it. And then the white shirt.
How many times did you do it?
I didn't do it. I probably directed one or two. But I remember, we would take it seriously. We had a team because we've always taken teams seriously.
Totally. Yeah.
And oh my gosh, we just took it seriously. We did all the exercises.
Oh yeah.
We did all the
trainings,
all the trainings, all the things. Right. Yeah. Getting in touch with your emotion, the root of your sin, all the things we did.
Yeah, I know.
And we had some misses.
Okay. One of them involving you. On Easter Sunday.
Yeah, so on Easter Sunday.
On the biggest stage of the year.
The biggest stage of the world. In the megachurch. Yeah, for sure.
Easter Sunday, big stage.
We had this whole thing. We involved a local college to do this beautiful painting. That's part of the problem. That's where it started falling down. We just accepted that painting. But the idea was basically, real quick, God takes broken things and makes them beautiful.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So... Right. We had
like shards of broken glass.
Yeah, shards of broken glass was the thing. Right. So we had like garbage on the stage with all this broken glass and this empty frame kind of hanging from the ceiling. Right. Another production feat. I don't don't think people realize what we put into these things.
And this was peak creativity, because this is something that, like, it wasn't just like the 5-minute section of the service for the sketch. We weaved it
throughout the whole thing,
the whole service,
including the sermon.
Right.
We choreographed when things would happen, when someone would come out.
And what was happening? What was the point?
So the point was garbage. Like in the garbage were the pieces. I was, still don't know why. I think someone quit or couldn't or something. You'd fish out a piece and just of the stained glass of the garbage, clean it off, hang it up.
Right.
Over and over and over. That's it. Very like slow movements.
Right.
Very demure, And by the end it was this beautiful, just stained glass image
made of broken pieces.
Yeah, all put together, beautiful. And please remember, our pastor was speaking about this the whole time.
Correct.
We were singing about it the whole time. Mm-hmm. The graphics before the service were stained glass, like all of the things.
About how God takes broken pieces and makes beautiful pictures.
We committed to the theme. Number one comment we got over and over and again. Why didn't anybody clean up the church before the Easter service? Why were they letting that girl on stage clean up that garbage?
Who decided to bring the janitor out?
Yeah, who decided that it was appropriate for the janitor to clean up during the sermon?
Didn't get it.
Didn't get it.
Over their heads.
That was my last day. Could have been. We had some, but that was a...
Yeah, and that, it became an enduring lesson for us of like, we have to spell things out.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
You can't be
so
like loving your art so much that you don't explain it. Oh, gosh.
But were there any other enduring, because what we're trying to do with this thing is like kind of redeem some of these things that maybe started in the megachurch and had maybe their own flaws at times, but maybe there was something good that came of it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing this is just happenstance, but I've been watching, it's the 50-year anniversary of SNL.
Oh.
So I've been watching, they've been doing a lot of documentaries about things, and they were talking about the transition from only live sketches to like those pre-recorded videos that like those teams would come in and do and stuff. Right. And I feel like we went through a similar thing. Like one of the enduring principles, I think, was how to craft a story, how to explain something well, and then that set us up for doing that way better in video. For sure, for me.
Yeah.
I think the other one for me is the idea of, it sounds elementary, but we would always, especially in youth ministry, we would tell kids like, hey, you're in this. Right. You're in this sketch tonight. Like you should tell your friends you're in it, tell your family that you're in it. Yeah. Anybody can come and, it's youth group, like anyone can come, blah, blah, blah. That was a huge engine for evangelism.
Yeah, I mean, it allowed more people access to the stage.
Yeah.
So instead of just the instrumentalist, instead of just the pastor, it was like, hey, there's another group of us that are involved in pulling this thing off, and it gave a great invitation tool.
And I think that's still true today. Like even, it doesn't have to be even something on stage. Like people that are just part of things that we do, they're much more likely to be like, talk about it, or invite people. But even just having conversations.
And I think about ownership too, what it does to ownership, to have people involved in the planning and execution of the stuff that happens through the church or at the church. I also just thought of one other thing that this conversation reminded me of is that it was really an attempt, and not always successful, admittedly, but an attempt to tie the truth of the Bible to everyday life.
Yes.
It was to bridge that gap between how do these ideas up here attach to how we actually live our lives and how real people might live this out. And so I think that's still something that we aim for and are figuring out all the time how to best do that, how to bridge the timeless truths of the Bible to, life in 2025. And so we don't really do sketches anymore.
No, but there's
other ways.
Yeah, and there's something to be said, and I'm personally passionate about this. I think you are too, but there is something to be said about the way that God created things and the way that you see him and Jesus navigating through scripture, and how much of it has to do with like art, creativity, the creation itself, the temple, like all these things. Even as far as like Paul then using like statues and object lessons and trying to explain things with art that exists. And so I just think we've had a fun ride with that.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. Fun memories.
Yeah.
Is it?
No. It's great. Okay, let's move on to training notes. So this is a chapter of the podcast we want to dedicate to overflow from some of our internal staff trainings or Q&As and stuff like that. We might have some staff come and ask questions even at some point. People may not know this about you, Derek, but I will say it on this episode.
Oh, wow.
You are basically a walking concordance of just training materials. Like take the like scripture and theology stuff aside, even just like leadership training principles and stuff. So you need a place to dump some of this extra.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that it was a training that I did recently with we have a pastors only meeting once a month, and that's where some people might follow our what are your pastors having for lunch.
Yes.
That's where we do that, and there are people online who think that happens weekly. There are some that think it happens daily.
Daily.
They're like, where's today's what are your pastors having for lunch? So that is
their wives can only make one lunch a month. Let's calm down.
It's a monthly meeting. But anyway, in that we did a quick it was a training / check-in.
Yeah.
That really I was trying to circle us back to sometimes you can get so far down in the weeds on a new idea that you can forget what you're actually doing.
Yes. That's 40% of my career. Remembering what you're doing.
So, as we're on this disciple-making venture and trying to reframe the church around better disciple-making measures and those sorts of things, and we're developing, today's conversation is about this Dream Disciple roles, and we're going to be doing all 4 of those roles. So we created the roles, we're creating tools around those roles and all that kind of stuff. And we just had this like step back moment in BYOL going, good. What is disciple making again? And we're putting new words to it, but let's remind ourselves of what we're actually doing. And so we came back to some of our traditional definitions. What is a disciple? A definition of disciple making. What are the biblical foundations? And so, you go back to the Great Commission, you go back to the Great Commandment, you go back to the Great Collaboration, which is John 17, Jesus' prayer. And to go, really those kind of capture what we're up to. And then, my friend Dan White put together this great list of, how did Jesus disciple other people? And so there was information, there was interdependence, there was incarnation, there was imitation, there was introspection, all the I words, but this idea that, that's a part of it. And then I shared in a message a few weeks ago, looking back, having been part of these kind of relationships myself many times over the years, but not just that, but having a unique perspective as a pastor of seeing some of the best ones live out, I kind of put together my own list of what are some of the elements of an effective discipling relationship, and just thinking through that. So anyway, and then we just really went through some questions and what I called thought experiments of I'll share a couple of questions. What are the bright spots of discipleship in our church right now? Where are we seeing evidence of these things happening? So again, we're stepping away from the down in the weeds and going, okay, let's really look at this and say, where is God at work in this area in our church? To give you one quick thought experiment, we said, if we removed all of our programs and events for a season, how would discipleship continue? In other words, what informal structures, relationships, or habits would sustain our mission if we stripped all of our stuff away?
That's good.
And so, I think it's important, again, I think just the principle here is it's important to step back from time to time and really ask, 30,000 foot questions versus, ground level. And so one of the things I wanted to say, though, we're making this tool that I used for this little training and the questions and the thought experiments available through my email list.
Cool.
And so if people aren't part of that, jump on that, and we'll send you a free copy of this little tool. So any thoughts about that, or the stepping back, or the any of the ways that you're interacting with these dream disciple things and actually seeing them in action or in motion?
Yeah, this is a really important thing to do. What you're saying, just stepping back in general. one cool thing, we had someone come through and interview to work here last week, and we just were having conversations about discipleship, but not calling it that. That's just, we were asking questions and he was asking us questions. And at one point I was like, my brain just started going like tool. And obviously I know these tools just because I've been all over them, but like just to be able to watch my team and then also myself be able to like put them into the conversation without it being step one, this, step two, this. Like, I don't know. It was just cool to see, especially other people start to adopt like the language and like, this can happen. If people just do this can happen. They have what they need. They can do it. I don't know. That's just like a random thing, but
no, that's great.
That was a cool thing that happened last week.
Yeah. Love it.
I love it too.
Great.
Okay, cool.
So perfect. And if people wanted to get their hands on this, feel free to jump into that email group. DerekSanford.com. Yep.
As we tweak our assimilation model to have more of a disciple-making focus and invent a multiplication funnel to awake the lake and reach our region, we're learning as we go. And each week we want to have a topic to discuss in front of you and a practical moment of learning during the week. And so today's topic is revolving around one of our dream disciple roles, how to be an intentional friend. So the role is an intentional friend. An intentional friend says, I partner with God to build healthy relationships and restore broken ones. And there are two questions that we have that go along with that role that our team came up with. Number one, who in my life needs me the most during this season, and what's my next step with them? And where do I need to lean into a relationship that has become distant or broken? So we asked Pastor Scott to find somebody who's good at this naturally, and that is Dave Case. So Scott, welcome back. And Dave is with us. He's been attending Grace for roughly 20 years. He has a wife, Kelly. You guys will be celebrating 30 wonderful years of marriage.
Wow, Dave.
And your daughter is 25, which feels
crazy,
impossible.
Right? Yeah.
And so you've done a lot around Grace with building up culture of just kind of men being men at Grace. And you've been a volunteer faithfully for several years and done tons of things from site pastor team to working with married couples. And you are full-time at Parker Lord here in Erie. And so this is your life, your passion, and we love having you on the team. So thanks for being here today. And so let's talk about.
And a recent elder.
Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot about that.
And a recent grandpa.
Oh, that'll do it.
Grandpa energy.
Oh, the energy just went. The energy just went like.
It went up and out.
Oh, suddenly I want to be in an easy chair. I don't know what's happening.
With a cigar.
Yeah.
Wait. Or some chamomile tea.
There you go.
Okay.
Cigar.
And Ben Gay in the air.
There you go.
So listen, we're talking about this idea of being an intentional friend. And before we kind of jump into it with Dave and just get really granular with it, I'd love to ask you guys, because you were both part of the process as we were developing these roles, like how did intentional friend make the list of our 4 discipleship roles, as you kind of trace back and go, why did this rise to the top as being one of those really important things that we wanted to make sure that all of our people were stepping into? So anybody want to take a stab at that?
Want to rock, paper, scissors for that one?
Go ahead.
Go
ahead.
You seem ready.
So when we took a look at the scriptures, right, we really looked at the 4 gospels and looked for themes of what does a true disciple of Jesus look like, and as the themes emerged, this idea of being a friend, because Jesus himself calls his disciples, no longer do I call you servants, I call you friends. And friendship just rose up, and we basically determined, well, you can't be a disciple without having friendships. And so I think that's at least my recollection is that's kind of how we landed there.
And it felt obvious. I remember it feeling obvious.
100%.
But also, as with all these roles, as we dug more and more into it, it became deeper and deeper and deeper the more kind of we dug.
Yeah.
And I liked, in addition to that, I thought this role specifically lined up for like where we are in Erie, what our community's like, because it's very segmented, fractured. Even to this day, there are just really like hard lines in our community of where you go, where you don't go. And all the way back from like when it was first kind of built by just ethnicities and whatnot. So, and we tend to, I think, have a lot of fractures. And so this, I think, spoke directly to that, which was cool.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing that I'd mention is, I mean, you take a look at the idea of relationship. It starts with the Trinity.
Yeah.
And so there's just a joy that just seems to start the whole entire story of that in being in relationship is central to everything. So
that's good. Yeah. And I think even as we're encouraging our church, and, Dave's here to talk a little bit about this, but like, being a disciple maker and looking at your sphere of influence as people that you could potentially, lead to Jesus or help to take next steps toward Jesus, that process begins with friendships. Like to just come at that as a stranger doesn't work, and so like the whole idea of discipleship and disciple making kind of begins with understanding how to be a friend. And how to almost build and develop skills around how do I do relationships well. It's almost a precursor to being able to do discipleship. So, that's great. Let's just talk about following Jesus and how does friendship play into that journey just in general. And I'll throw that open to everybody. And then Scott, I know you're here to maybe ask Dave some questions about, how he kind of lives this value out. So we can go from there. But how do you guys see friendship as being important in just following Jesus in general? What does friendship bring to the table in your journey with Christ?
I mean, I think for me, it brings like depending on the relationship, obviously, but usually like a pretty honest, reflective surface. So someone who can just say like, no. You're not buying usually in my case, you're no. And when I think about it, and even being introverted, when I think about big changes forward spiritually for me, it does always surround being proximal to people. And whether that's like in a life group or just like a friendship thing or a mentoring thing, whatever, that always is a catalyst, whether I like it or not. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I know I just talked about this recently in a message, but like me being, I'm having done this a long time, like I'm usually the one leading these kind of little environments or whatever where a group of guys get together. And I got invited into a circle about a year ago of guys where, I wasn't the leader. And man, really, I can point to those conversations, those give and takes as like really growth curves for me at this time and stage of my journey of just like, it's when people who love each other rub shoulders with each other, and it's like, we got. I'm getting better as a follower of Jesus because I'm sitting in this circle. I always say our life was not meant to be lived as a table for one. Right. And I think that has ramifications, just ripples out. And I just think that if we're made in the image of God, that means by default, then we're made to be in relationship because it's exactly what God Himself does with the Father or with the Son and the Spirit. So, You got anything to add to that, buddy?
Oh yeah, I mean your voice is always resonating in my house with my wife, and it's let's
break that down. Let's break that down.
Well, I
gloss right over it.
Good start.
Keep the train rolling.
I love it. Yeah. Well, I always hear the words of isolate or insulate, don't isolate, right? And I think that becomes a really big key thing in looking at relationship with an individual and realizing that we're not meant to isolate because we can really wreak havoc on our health and our mental state and even other relationships that want to be part of your life. We can do it from that. And I think really the driving force behind that is like you look at how Jesus was that model of relationship and stepping in and really knowing his disciples. They lived together. They did a lot together. Yeah. A lot more needs to be done than just an hour at Sunday service.
Yeah. Yeah, and dudes aren't good at that by nature.
Well, Derek, you mentioned something a while ago. It's been really resonating with me is like typical people, when you look at the close proximity of friendship and the bestie, I don't know if that's a Taylor Swift term or whatever, but Let's just say that
Dave, I
close
wouldn't know.
dude, right? And I think it was like something like 5 or 6% of people can say they actually have a close friend. And it's gotten worse and worse. And as we get older, we have different shifts of priorities and so forth and work. And we kind of lose that in a relationship aspect. And we focus on things that really aren't really Jesus modeled. Yeah. Right. And we miss opportunities all the time because we're too busy. We're too fast. We don't slow the pace down enough to really have relationships, honest relationships.
Yeah. That's good.
It's funny. One of the things that, I just shared that friendships for most people peak in their 20s, their ability to bring on new friends and to make friends. And so like, it's so wild. I went to a kind of a retreat thing with some guys a couple years ago, fishing trip in Montana and, all this kind of stuff. It was really cool. It was my first time fly fishing, which was really fun. But the guy that runs this retreat center, mostly for guys, all of the workers at this retreat center, so the people that were making the meals and they were taking us out on the fishing trips and driving us around and all that kind of stuff, were dudes in their mid-20s. And when the owner of the retreat center came back, at the end, he had a little campfire session with us, and he goes, "That's very intentional because I want you guys to remember when you actually had friends." And it was a very challenging statement because it's like we got to watch them do the stuff that dudes in their 20s do. And it was like, goofing around, playing cards and having fun and, razzing each other and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, man, that if we're not careful, that can go away. Yeah. The older we get.
Yeah. I think that's the thing Dave has been, the reason why I picked him is he's been very intentional with me. So much so that he took me into like backwoods Pennsylvania, deep woods Pennsylvania. I don't even know where I could find it on a map. It was like off the grid. He's like, "I want to show you something." I look around, I'm like, "There's nothing around for hundreds of miles."
It was dark woods.
But he was very intentional with taking me to a space that was very significant to him.
That's cool.
And shared that space and taught me how to fly fish. My line was in the trees more than it was in the water, but nonetheless, he's chuckling over here. But the intentionality comes to mind with that. But that's just one aspect. So like when you think of just friendship in general, especially as as a Christian, what are some things that you just think need to be developed? Skills that skills that would need to be developed in that?
Well, I think really you have to come at it that you're not expecting anything in return, that you're giving yourself and you're giving your time and even your finances freely to an individual, right? Even giving your backstrap of a deer you got.
That's true. He did
cooked
do
in
that.
the wood. Yeah,
he did that too.
I mean, that's really big for a hunter is to give the backstrap. That's
Danielle was completely appalled. It was delicious.
I don't even know what that means. I'll be honest.
Danielle needs
later,
a barf bag.
I don't need to know.
But a lot of people, when you sit there and think about it, you just kind of have to have that willingness not to expect anything in return of it. Give it freely. I mean, that's what we were given with, Christ and our salvation. I mean, and that's a big one. And
I think that's a good word, Dave, for Christians, because I think a lot of times people come into these friendships, and the fact that we've named it as a role can really kind of confuse this and go, I'm coming in with an agenda. Yeah. And I think if there's any sense of that, you're a project for me. If there's any sense, so I think what you just said is so profound that, man, it does have to be this, like, I'm giving myself, for nothing in return. And man, if God uses it, giddy up, then it'll be cool. But
and it was funny because it was like when we were lining that up, Heather offered a lot of cash to take Scott into the woods. And
I bet she did.
So
give him a backstrap.
Wasn't there a GoFundMe? I remember.
GoFundMe.
I think I gave $10.
My husband to get lost in the woods.
Take him deep into the woods.
She thought backstrap was some sort of punishment.
Yeah, I did. I want my $10
Heather,
back.
take him and give him a backstrap.
it's a tenderloin. For those that don't know, it's a tenderloin of the deer that's for hunters is big. So It's food.
But go ahead, keep going. Were you going to keep going on that?
I lost thought.
No,
right
sorry.
now.
That's what happens
I'm
here.
thinking backstrap right now.
Yeah.
But I think you talked about, so there was the freely giving of yourself. So there's a sacrificial point to that.
Yeah, and there's a serving aspect of that as well. I mean, when you look at it, everybody has an opportunity to, or everybody has a willingness to receive somebody serving them or gifting them or blessing them. And I think sometimes we can get in our own way of receiving a blessing. And if we can't receive somebody's offering or blessing to help us or whatever else, you really have to question, can you really receive Christ's salvation for you? And me and my brother had talked about that a lot. And it's just like, if you can't receive, because I have a hard time receiving, right? And I've learned how to adjust how to receive in a way, because he really put it profoundly. And I really respected his input to me of, if you can't receive just this small little thing, how do you receive such a greatest gift that we've ever received?
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think you've not just shown me, but you've shown the countless number of guys that, you've had the ability to, pour into, influence, whatever word you want to use. Because to me, I was just like, what does this guy keep? He Marcos me. He'd Marco me all the time. He's like, hey, just letting you know I'm here. I'm just like, what does he want? And at the end of the day, I think Heather's just like, you do maybe think that he just might want to be your friend?
Well, that's still up for grabs. We're still, it's been 5 years, 6 years? We're still wondering.
I want to come back to this like serving and being served thing though, because I think that's a really cool angle that people don't often think about. And I know, what you just said in terms of like putting yourself in a position to receive from somebody else or to be served by somebody else is often one of the best friendships tools that we have. I know for me, instead of like going around to my neighbors going, hey, I've got something you can borrow if you ever need it. If I need something to go to them and say, could I borrow your snowblower? So now I'm in the the needing role instead of the giving role. And that is a profound kind of position to be in to build friendships. Because you're being vulnerable in that moment, going, I don't have everything, I need your help with this. And man, that can really extend an important kind of connection tool to a person when you put yourself in the position to be served.
We have neighbors like that that we didn't really have to like force a connection with, but me being me, just feeling like I needed a baby step of not just like, oh, hey, how's it going? Here's your mail, and that was what it was. It was like, hey, do you guys want to put this trampoline together with us? Do you want to, would you like to, and then it was like over for a cookout, over to their house for a cookout. And yes, it started that way, being like super intentional, but like those are the building blocks that just lets it become this like natural relationship. So you're not feeling like it's a project or whatever, and that's become like one of the richest friendships that Dave and I have had in a long time. So
that's cool.
It's a good step for someone to be able to take if you're like nervous about how do I be friends? Like if you don't want to Marco somebody 10 times and hope they answer. Just help them and let them help you. It's good.
So there's something that I want you to try to put words to, because when people do things very naturally, you can just be like, well, this is just what everybody does, but it's not the case. And so what I want you to do, I'm going to give you a little bit of a scenario with this. So this doesn't come naturally for a lot of people, but it just seems like it does for you. So at the one of the points where I was really overwhelmed with just loss and grief, when we had a close guy that we both shared friendship with, at the end of that funeral service, you didn't wait for me to, you brought like 8 guys with you, and you just infiltrated my space with just your presence and those guys' presence. And you just did that. Put words to that. I don't know if you can, but like,
or the thought process,
behind it. Because that still to this day is the top 5 most meaningful moments of my life.
It's very much one of mine too. I mean, when you really think about it, it was really just God prompting me to just go and be with that person. You know, when we look at that, it's like, not that I can do anything, and I can't do anything in your grief. Mm-hmm. I can just be there. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think about like Job, right? Those guys saw him from afar, and they came and they mm-hmm. sat with him. Now I can't offer you anything. I could just offer you that I'm here for you. That was it. That's what really, it was just God prompted me to just go because he's hurting. And I could see the grief, the weight and everything. It was just God driven, I guess. And moving to it and being obedient, right?
Well, that's good. Next right thing.
That's the next, yeah. And I think that's so that's, you made
it's a big thing.
I mean, we talk about it all the time, and I'm glad Dave's bringing it into this context, because it is, you know, what we said is the greatest skill every Christian possesses is the ability to hear and respond to the voice of God.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to friendship, that's true too. Yes. You know, so it's like, what is God prompting you? What is God pressing you to do for that person? And maybe it's send a text message. Maybe it's take them a meal. But like, it sounds
through.
Very basic, but it's like, just do what God tells you to do.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at it too, Jesus was rejected.
Yeah.
Even Peter denied knowing him. Yeah. So it's like, you know, when you're wanting to know somebody, if they don't want, or you don't have a relationship, or they don't want to be friends, or they don't have time for you, you can't take on that rejection and take on that hurt and that offense, and you have to come at it with an opposing spirit and say, you know what, I'm just going to receive that I tried what God had prompted me to do to bless that person in the moment they're in. And you never know, because it's funny, because, you know, we talk about receiving. We're walking down the street this summer, and our neighbor, we usually just wave. And he's like, hey, you want some walleye? I'm like, no, I hate fish. You know, I don't want any of it. It's gross.
Any backstraps?
Yeah, backstraps. Now we're talking, right? But Kelly's like, yes, we'll take walleye. You know, I'm like, oh, now I got to go talk to this guy and go into his house. You know? But going into that house and talking to him, we really learned something about each other that was common. He had a son that passed away from epilepsy.
Oh.
And, you know, with our daughter and her epilepsy, it was really a aha moment that God had placed this person to start a relationship with in the neighborhood. We talk about know your neighbors and stuff, but to start a relationship with that guy, and him and I have had several talks when he's walking his dog now, and we've gotten to know each other.
That's cool.
Very well, based upon an intro to, hey, I don't want walleye from you, I'm okay, but just receiving the walleye because my wife made me, and bringing it in, you know. But
I think there's a lesson here.
It was pretty, it was. Listen to your wife. That's pretty much it, right? Yeah. But it was clearly another moment of God's prompting.
Yeah,
that
cool.
Somebody else needed something, and we had something similar.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was really neat.
How have you replicated that? Because you have such a desire, specifically for the guys that call, you know, Erie home, Grace Church home, to get connected and to be in relationship with one another. So what are give a couple of steps that you've tried to instill in them to kind of grab hold of this idea of being in friendship?
Boy, I think some of the guys on Wednesday morning at the cakery, you know, we've been, since pre-COVID, it was the old IHOP guys and so forth, and we're still meeting every week. And a lot of it's who's on your board of directors. Like, who's guiding you, who's holding you accountable.
Say more about that. Like, explain what you mean by board of directors.
So when you look at it, a successful business has a successful board. It's not made up with the same individuals of the same mindset or thinking or directive. It's a lot of various different concepts of belief and challenges, and you build that relationship, and it really gets built over time, and the selective of the right people that you feel are worthy of speaking into your life, right? And when you really think about it, the big question I keep asking guys there and the Monday night guys is, who's on your board of directors? Like, who's there on your board that can call you out, rib you, you know, talk about the Buffalo Bills loss or whatever else, you know, we'll throw that one out there.
It's good job.
Moment of silence for you.
But who's the guy that's going to challenge you and call you out when you're moving in a wrong direction?
Yeah.
And if you don't have that and you're alone, man, the enemy loves that. The enemy loves separation, loves just isolating one person at a time. So when you're really looking at it, it's the core values that you feel spiritually connected with people, you know? And I think that's the part that we have a hard time trying to really identify is who am I connected with from a spirit perspective or a Jesus perspective. And we still want to grip onto our old friends and so forth, but there comes a time when we need to mature and we need to grow forward in our faith, and we need to surround ourselves with the right individuals. So the board of directors is highly important in providing input into your life, as well as you asking or seeking advice from them when you're looking for direction. I mean, that's why we have boards in big companies and so forth, because you don't want the company to go off path, because then you're bankrupt and you have nothing. And that happened to me. I mean, I really went to where I had no friends, and I had nobody around me, and it was just like, this really is. I thought I was fine, but I wasn't. I really realized. And
what happened in you that turned that around? What like how did you come to the realization you're like, I don't want this anymore. I need to change this.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
So what happened there is I got a call from a longtime friend that I was in a group with, Mike Watson, when my daughter had status, and we were at Cleveland Clinic, and I had been really wrestling with God and really wasn't coming to church or nothing. I'm like, I'm done. You know, I was finished. I was broken. I was everything else. And Mike Watson's like, hey, do you want some people come visit you from Grace Church? And I was like, Mike, I gotta, let me think about this one, you know. I was really, really just like, no. And, you know, God's just sitting there going, just let somebody come, let somebody come, let somebody come. So I went in the room, I'm like, hey, Cal, guess what? They want to send somebody from Grace, you know. And I hate but I'm going to be honest here, right?
Great.
You know, because I was in a spot where I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. I had nobody on my board, nobody guiding me, nobody there to help me. And Cal's like, well, maybe we should. And I'm like, okay, here, we'll give Mike a call back. I said, okay, send them. You know, we'll be courteous and hospitable when they come, you know, and we'll just go through the actions. And lo and behold, Malcolm Bell and Scott Michael shows up. And Scott and I kind of started that deeper dig with each other, and Scott challenging me and what God has for you, and really sparking that, hey, come to IHOP. And I'm like, that's early, man. It was 6:00. And I'm laying awake in bed, and God's sitting there going, you can get up to go deer hunting early. You can get up to go fishing early. Why can't you just do one day a week, getting up early and go? What's it going to hurt? And so I kind of stepped in. Yeah. And that's where I met Jake, Dustin, and Scott.
That's cool.
It's great. It's a great story. And I think that's a good place to wrap up. That origin story is really important, because I think you know, and it's funny for those that may not know that story but know you now. They would probably never have dreamed that you were at a place where you were isolated, because you are such a great friend to people. And, you know, I think the origin story sheds light on the fact that you were at a place where you didn't have that. And once you had it, you were able to give it away to others. And that's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't want to let that go.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing of wrestling with God, when you realize that, you know, Jacob, when he wrestled with God, and realizing who you're wrestling with, and then you don't want to let go. And then you have this other moment of these guys coming into your life. Ed Finney in the room when we were at Hammett, coming into the room. That's when God started putting these guys in my life to surround me, to guide me, to help me, to heal me.
It's great. You're a great friend to people, Dave, and thanks for sharing some of your wisdom experience with us. Thanks, Scott, for guiding that time, and we appreciate you guys both. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Love you, dude.
You bet. You still owe me money.
Okay, so we're going to end with something that actually happened this week in our journey to Reinventing Church, and we're going to talk about, really, for the first time officially releasing, you had a hand in releasing our discipleship model kind of out into the wild with our life group leaders. And one of the interesting things about that, I think sometimes there can be a perception of like, we need to do something new. Derek needs to talk about it to this group or that group or whatever. But really, I think there are certain times where it makes sense for you to, because you're very high on in the Working Genius on galvanizing. And so this is the time where like this group, they need the information and they need to be inspired to move forward, make it their own and take it into their everyday. So this was like a perfect way to use that genius, flex that muscle with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I intersected with our life group leaders, and you use this word vehicle. I should probably explain what that means, because, we defined our discipleship roles. So there are 4 roles. But the question becomes, certainly in a big church like ours, how does that get distributed to the masses? It's not like I'm just preaching sermons on repeat on those 4 things, or and so obviously our life groups are an important place where those discipleship roles are going to be talked about, implemented, practiced, held accountable, all that stuff. And one of the things that we've done in this new model is we've put serving teams kind of in the same category as groups. It used to be that we said we wanted everybody in a group and everybody in a team or serving on a team. Now we've kind of put them in the same strata of our strategy, going, actually, we want you to find community in a group or a team, and we want those discipleship roles to be lived out in a group or a team.
Either way.
Or both. Like some people are still going to do both.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what we had to do is come up with a what we're calling a vehicle that's going to be common among those programs where these discipleship roles are being lived out. And so our discipleship vehicle is for groups and teams. And kind of the key phrasing around this is more structural than anything about how those things would operate. And so we're saying that the natural flow for a group and the natural flow for a team is that there's a connect, grow, and go component to it. So that there's some time connecting relationally, that there's a growth time, and that's always around Scripture and implementing the Scripture and prayer into our life. And then there's a go component where we're activating people to live out this discipleship role. And so recognizing that in our groups, this vehicle is going to probably emphasize different things than in our teams.
Right.
And there's a time thing. So our groups often meet for 60 to 90 minutes, a week or every other week or whatever. Our teams sometimes meet for 5 minutes before they serve together monthly or whatever. And so I think part of the challenge is coming up with a vehicle that will serve both of those things. And we've said from the beginning that our groups are going to have to become more team-like in their activation, and our teams are going to have to become more group-like in their community and relational side. And so anyway, I had this meeting where we kind of laid out that new flow, connect, grow, and go to our life group leaders. They received it very well.
Good.
And obviously gave ideas about what each of those components could look like. Yeah. But I majored with them on the activation side, the go side, and to say, how do our groups become more multiplication focused? And so both in multiplying groups and as those group leaders becoming activators for helping people to live these things out. The tendency for groups, I think, is for the gravitational pull for groups is to become inward very quickly. And so this has to be intentional to get us out. And then on the other side, we haven't done this yet, but on the other side with our teams, the emphasis for them has got to be, how do we get better at the connect and grow side? Because we're going.
They're just doing it,
The go is the way we serve together, but we really need to emphasize the connect and grow. So that's a little update. That was a recent thing. It was really well received. That's good. Fact, one of the really positive comments at the end, one of the group leaders raised their hand and just said, thank you for the clarity, and thank you for putting these tools in our hands and giving us kind of a target to shoot at with our groups.
That's great.
The kinds of people that we're trying to build is I think clarity around that is really helpful to those leaders. So that was nice.
Sweet. Okay.
Yep.
Well, that's it for today. If you like today's show, you can give us thumbs up, star, whatever platform you're on, 5 stars. And just a reminder, you can find detailed show notes, related resources over at dereksanford.com/reinventing church. And that's where you can also subscribe to that newsletter he was talking about that'll have that disciple making imagination resource in it. And you'll get all his other latest free tools and posts and whatnot. All right. So thanks.
Thanks.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.